How's it going, folks? I'm Cody Campbell with High Ground Gaming. Today we are unboxing and reviewing the RODECaster Pro 2. I'm going to start by walking you through the specs, then I'll open it up, let you take a look at what comes inside. After that, we'll go to the review portion where I'll give you my thoughts on it, and then we'll go to High Ground Gaming's final score. Stick around. While the original RODECaster Pro was primarily designed with podcasters in mind, a lot of other people found a lot of varying uses for it. So when Rode came out with the Pro 2, they wanted to accommodate a wider spectrum of content creators. So the Pro 2 is designed for podcasters, but it's also designed for streamers, musicians, YouTubers, voiceover, pretty much any kind of audio mixing needs you might have. It utilizes some really nice low noise, high gain Revolution preamps. It has 4 Neurotrick combo inputs, 9 assignable channels. It uses 6 physical faders and 3 virtual faders. It has a high performance quad core audio engine. It uses Aphex onboard audio processing and effects. It has 8 programmable smart pads, 2 USB Type-C interfaces, and it has Bluetooth connectivity. It can do multi-track or stereo recording to a micro SD card, a USB device, or to a computer. It has 4 headphone outputs, a 5.5-inch touchscreen, and Rode promises that there's going to be a lot of firmware updates for it on the way. So even after you buy it, it should continue to improve. That's about it though. Let's open it up. Let's see what we got in here. All right, so we got power cable in there, and then we've got the mixing board right here. It looks like it's going to have an adapter for a USB Type-C plug-in, and then we've got a USB Type-C to C cable, nice rubber cable. That'll be good for connecting to the computer or connecting to any devices. And then we've just got a small little rubber clip. There don't seem to be any printed instructions in the box, but there is this QR code that says that you can scan it for compatible software, accessories, and the user guide. So we'll probably have to do that. All right, let's take a look at the board itself. So without plugging it in, just looking at it, this is a professional looking piece of equipment. This is a metal surface here, not plastic. It's got some heft to it. It's got a bit of weight. You can see that there is a 3/8 inch nut right there, or we've got some nuts all around here. So you should be able to mount this in a number of different ways if you want to. Otherwise, we've got some rubber grips for just letting it sit on the desk. As I said, it has some weight to it. So with those rubber grips, it's really not going to move around at all, just sitting there, but you could mount it if you wanted it to be on a stand or on a wall or something like that for whatever reason. So I don't want to speak too much too soon to what each of these do, because I know that most of these are multi-function buttons that you can program using the touch screen here. I know that this is a smart dial of some sort, probably does a whole bunch of stuff. I'm gonna have to dig into that more as I'm researching it. Got a record button here, some nice faders. They feel very good. They're a teensy bit wobbly, but they're very secure in there, and there's just enough resistance to them where you can easily slide them with one finger, but it feels good. All these buttons feel very nice as well, not cheap. The dials, yeah, nice and snug. This one's got some tactile feedback to it as you use it, so you can tell you're sort of sliding through individual ones where this is more just an even, smooth keel. Got all kinds of stuff on the back here. Here are the 4 Neurotrick inputs. These are multi-inputs, so you should be able to put a couple different kinds of devices into there. We've got the 4 headphone outputs right here. We've got speaker outputs. We've got the 2 USB Type-C ports, so you can actually connect multiple devices to this at once. You can connect a phone and a computer, 2 computers, or however you want to do it. It looks like this is probably the SD card reader or micro SD card reader. We've got an Ethernet port, and then this is probably the charging USB Type-C port, and we got a power button there. That's about all I can tell just by looking at it. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and throw it on my computer, play around with it a little bit, see what features it's got in store, and we'll be right back with the review portion. Don't go anywhere. All right, folks, I've spent some time with the RODECaster Pro 2, and boy, there is a lot to talk about. But before I get into all that, I really just want to be upfront with you all and let you know that I'm not like an audio engineer. I review microphones, I review headsets, I've spent some time adjusting audio for videos like this one and for Twitch streams and stuff like that. So I just want to be really honest with all of you and make sure that you know that I'm not the guy who's going to tell you all the itty bitty little things that this can do. I'm going to go over some of the major features, what they do, and how they worked in my experience. Sound good? Let's dive in. I'm going to start, like I always do, by talking about the build quality. Now, I covered a lot of this while I unboxed it, so I'm going to skim over some of it, but the build quality is pretty impeccable. The faders, the dials, the buttons, they're all top-notch. They all feel like they belong on a piece of pro-grade equipment. Now that I've got it plugged in and I've been playing around with it for a little while, I can see that the screen is honestly better than it has a right to be. The definition on this is very, very good. It's very bright, very responsive. You can control it with both a touchscreen and a rotary dial. So the touchscreen is going to be how you navigate most of the major settings. And then when you want to fine-tune smaller settings, you switch to the rotary dial, and that'll allow you to adjust them one notch at a time. So let's talk about the connectivity and how the channels work on this thing. First of all, there are a lot of connectivity options for this. There are the 4 Nutric connections, which are combo jacks for both XLR input and TRS input. This is where you're going to be plugging in your mics, this is where you're going to be plugging in your instruments, and this is where you're going to be plugging in any other line-in equipment, like if you have a different mixer that you want to run the mics and instruments through before coming into this. Each of the 4 Nutric inputs have Revolution preamps built into them. Rode claims that these preamps are so powerful that mics really don't need boosters, lifters, or external audio processing at all. Even the ones that typically would need a lifter are going to work just fine on these. And in fact, if you add a lifter, it's actually going to introduce unnecessary noise. The only kind of mic that doesn't seem to work with this are USB mics. That kind of makes sense because you would probably connect those directly to the computer. The preamp is already built into that, and so feeding it through the RODECaster Pro 2 would be kind of a waste. If you're buying the RODECaster Pro 2 and a mic at the same time, you're going to be better off with an XLR mic anyway. The only kind of bummer about not being able to use USB mics is that if you already have a really nice USB mic that you've invested money into and you want to be able to mix it with the other audio, it's just not going to work here. I even tried using Rode's own NT USB Mini that they sent me a while back and I reviewed, and it just would not connect through the USB Type-C ports. So there are 6 physical channels on the board and 3 virtual channels. What that basically means is there are 6 actual faders on the board that you can use to control channels physically, and then there are 3 that are going to be controlled on the touch screen. Each of these channels can be assigned to a different input, so you can go ahead and put your mic input onto the first slider, your audio from your connected PC or other device to the second one. You can put an instrument on the third one. You can put the audio effects on the fourth one, and on and on and on and on, all the way up to the total of 9 channels. You can even combine 2 different inputs to a single channel so that when you push the fader up, it's going to drive the volume up, and when you push it down, it's going to drive the volume down for both of those inputs at the same time. Each of these channels comes with their own listen button and their own mute button. Now, these are pretty interesting. So the listen button controls what audio is being soloed to the headset that's plugged into the first headset monitoring jack. Meanwhile, the mute button allows you to mute audio from passing through to the location where the audio is being recorded. There are 2 USB Type-C ports. These can be used to connect to either a PC or a mobile device like a smartphone or a tablet. This allows audio to be exchanged both to and from these devices. So you can be recording audio to OBS or streaming through OBS to something like Twitch or YouTube, but you can also be taking the game audio, pulling it into the board, and then mixing it with the rest of your audio. This is also how you connect to the Rode Central software, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. The final connectivity option is Bluetooth, which is always handy. There's a bit of latency there, so you're probably not going to want to rely on that too much, but if you want to make a phone call or something like that and have that mixed in, Bluetooth is plenty sufficient for that. Now let's dive into the audio processing, because this is pretty interesting as well. There are presets for multiple XLR mics on here, including Rode's own microphones like the Pod mic, but also really popular ones that Rode did not make, like the Shure SM7B. If you have one of these XLR mics, then it is super convenient because you really just have to select the microphone and then that's pretty much it. It's connected. If you don't have one of these microphones, no need to worry though. You just need to know if your mic is a condenser mic or a dynamic mic, and there's sort of a generic preset for both of those. Then, once you have selected that, the Pro 2 has this sort of built-in gain wizard that it allows you to do in order to set the gain for your microphone. Basically, you just sit a standard distance from the microphone, you speak into it at a normal volume, and then you adjust the gain until it is being received in this green area, which the Pro 2 is telling you is sort of the sweet spot for that sort of microphone. And then that's it. It saves it and it moves on. All right, here is a quick microphone test. We have a condenser mic, the HyperX Procast, plugged into the RODECaster Pro 2 right now. This is a brand new mic from HyperX that we're going to be doing a review on pretty soon, so subscribe if you want to see that. We dialed in the gain using the settings on just the generic condenser microphone, and I think it sounds pretty good. How about you? Now, if you're an audio novice, that's probably enough. You're good to go. It's going to sound crisp and clear. The presets on this thing are very, very good. But if you want to adjust it a little bit, there's actually sort of two different difficulty levels for audio adjustment. Aphex has these three different processing metrics that are sort of culminations of groups of different processes that they're working on all together. There's depth, which is sort of the low-end adjustment. It's going to give your voice more bass and more richness. There's sparkle, which is used to add brightness and detail to the signal. It's good for giving more clarity, which is nice. And then there's punch, which is a slight compression that it's adding so that the highs and lows are sort of coming together a little bit. As I mentioned, the presets are already very good on this in all of my testing, so you probably don't want to mess with it too much, but if you find yourself lacking a little bit of bass, just turn the depth up just a tiny bit, and then you should probably be good. If, on the other hand, you are an expert who has spent a lot of time working with audio stuff and you're not afraid to dive in there and get into the nitty-gritty little details, there are 7 advanced processing methods that you can use. There is a high-pass filter, a de-esser, a noise gate, a compressor, an equalizer, an exciter, and panning. There are also 2 adjustable effects. You can adjust echo and you can adjust reverb. I think this was really smart on Rode's part because they've basically broken it down into 3 different sort of knowledge levels here. There's the super basic knowledge level where basically you're just going to set the gain and call it done, and that's going to sound good. That's going to sound clean. Then there's the people who want to tinker a little bit more. They can get into that depth and sparkle and punch and just make some minor adjustments to get the audio more where they want it. And I think most people would actually feel comfortable, you know, hitting those dials a little bit. You can always turn them back. And then there's the more advanced stuff, which definitely, you know, things like limiters and stuff like that are going to give some people pause, but they're there for the people who know how to use them. So now let's talk about the smart pads, which are these sort of big buttons on the right side of the board. These are pretty cool. There are 8 pads, but if you hit those arrow buttons at the top, you can switch between pages on 8 different banks of assignable sounds and effects that you can put on these pads, for a grand total of 64 different effects that you can attach to this. There are a bunch that come pre-installed on there, but you can delete those, you can modify them, and you can make your own. You can actually record your own sounds and edit them right on the board. So if you hit the record button, you say something, and then you hit the record button again to stop, you can go back in there and cut out the pauses at the beginning and the end, or crop it down to whatever you want. I think that's pretty cool. There are also a handful of built-in effects that are pretty fun and can definitely find a lot of uses on radio shows, podcasts, Twitch streams. The options are pretty limitless. Here's a few examples of the audio presets that come with the RODECaster Pro 2. We've got, pretty basic sounds like an air horn. That sort of thing. There's applause. Stuff like that you can play around with and have fun with during any kind of show, really. And then there's also these effects, these filters that you can put on your voice, like
there's the kidnapper sound,
or there's
this really cool monster sound that I like a lot,
or there's
robot, or I don't know, when you want to be a robot.
There's lots of cool, fun stuff that you can play with. One thing that they do that is very cool, but also a little frustrating, is that these actually have MIDI controls. So they sort of work like the Stream Deck. You can program these to do certain functions in certain programs. So take OBS. If you want to be able to hit a button to switch to your in-game screen, and then switch to your be right back screen, and then switch to your stream ending stream, all that kind of stuff, you can do that with a touch of the button. It's not quite as easy or as convenient as the Stream Deck, though. For one thing, the images don't pop up on the actual buttons. They're just color-coded like all the other effects. For another, you've got to download separate plugins, and there's a little bit of finagling to get it all to actually work. It takes some work to get it done. Now, if you are on the fence about buying a Stream Deck and you're on the fence about buying one of these, you could buy one of these and you can get it to work and you can get it to do the things. But if you already have a Stream Deck and you've got space on your desk for both, I don't see a lot of people tossing their Stream Deck in the garbage and just using this. The Stream Deck is still more convenient and generally better, I would say. Recording on this device is pretty cool. There's generally 3 methods of doing it. The first would be if you have it connected to a PC, then you can just use a recording software and set the board itself as the output. So say you have OBS and you want to stream or capture video for YouTube or Twitch, then you're just going to have the board as the output and you're just going to capture the audio there. If you want to record to the board itself, you can do that either by plugging a USB storage device in there, like a thumb drive, or you can plug in a micro SD card and record straight to that. Being able to record directly to the board is going to be very useful for anyone who's ever recording on location. Say you're at like a convention and you're recording a panel of people speaking. That's a lot easier to do than to hook up the board to a laptop if the board itself can just record. Another cool thing that this board can do is it can record in multi-track. That means that each input can be recorded to its own separate file. That's really, really useful if you want to be doing mixing or balancing outside of the board itself. If you want to record everything at the same volume level and then plug it into a audio mixing software and then adjust the levels or play with it there, then you can absolutely do that. Now let's dive into the Rode Central software. And honestly, I think this might be the weakest thing about the board, but to be honest, it's nice that it's there at all. Like, they didn't need to include this. It allows users to set audio channels, configure the connected outputs, configure the display, customize the smart pads, and manage recording transfers. Most of the features that the software does can be adjusted on the board itself. You don't really need to use the software for almost anything that it does, which is kind of why I feel it's a little bit weak, but it is convenient. It's actually, in my opinion, a little easier to do it on the software, so that is something. Like, there's something to be said for just a software that exists to make things a little easier than doing it on the board itself. The main uses that I found for using the software were mostly for transferring sounds onto the smart pads. If I wanted to take a clip from a song or an audio file that I had on my PC and turn that into a sound that I could play or loop on the smart pad, then the software makes that very, very easy. That honestly doesn't cover everything. There's probably 100 things that this board does that I haven't even touched on, but That's about all that I could really wrap my head around. So without further ado, let's get down to the verdict. So the RODECaster Pro 2 MSRPs at $699.99. Obviously, that is a big price tag. That's a lot of money for most people, and I'm not going to say that it's cheap. But what I will say is that if you look at everything it does and the cost of the individual components that it would take to build a setup that does everything that this does, it would cost thousands of dollars. And it would take up a ton of space. It would just be scattered all over your desk. There'd be wires and cables going everywhere. It would be a pain. The RODECaster Pro 2 doesn't really have a lot of direct competition because nothing else really does what the RODECaster Pro 2 does. There are individual parts that do things that the RODECaster Pro 2 does, but none of them do all the things it does. It is a preamp. It is an audio processing station. It is a mix board. It is an effect bank. It is an audio monitoring station. And it is an audio recording setup. It is a lot of different things all in one moderately compact package. It is pretty big when you compare it to most other devices, but when you compare it to all the things it does, it's pretty compact. That's why we decided to give the RODECaster Pro 2 a 4.8 out of 5, which is, I believe, the highest score we've ever given a product. Honestly, it's not going to be for everyone. If you're just starting out in streaming or YouTube or content creation of whatever sort and you aren't really making money on it yet, you don't need this. You can get by with a USB mic just fine. There are a lot of really great USB mics out there with a much lower startup cost than $700 plus the cost of the microphone itself. If you just need a product to do one or two of the things that this does, then you can probably find those cheaper, and that is a valid solution. But if you need 3 of the things this does, or 4, you're starting to get into the territory where you're going to be spending more money for less functionality. So if you've got the money to spend and you're looking to upgrade your audio setup, we think that this is a solid choice. All right, that's going to do it for us today though, folks. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't already. We've got a lot more content coming real soon, and we'd hate for you to miss any of it. While you're at it, go ahead and drop down into the comments and let us know what you think. Are you thinking about getting the Pro 2, or is there something else you have in mind? All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Happy gaming.